Thank you. How's everybody doing? So, who remembers the Muppet movie? Everybody see the Muppet movie? Right. Okay, so the Muppet movie is actually sort of the origin story of the Muppet canon, if you will. And one of the key plot points in it is that Kermit the Frog is offered a bunch of cash to shill for a chain of frog-like restaurants. And he actually turns this down, not wanting to abandon his dream. But Doc Hopper gets pretty mad about it and ends up, escalating things to the point where he actually sends a frog assassin after him. It's kind of crazy. But Kermit stands up to him and he says, you know what? I've got a dream too. But my dream is about singing and dancing and making people happy. It's the kind of dream that gets better the more you share it with other people. And I've found a whole bunch of friends who share the same dream as me. And that makes us kind of like a family. What do you have, Doc? I mean, once you get all those restaurants, what are you going to do with that? Kermit knew who he was in that moment, and we can learn a lot from him if we want to change the world. We all know that we can get our message out on social networks, or that we can raise money for causes that we care about, but those are just trees in the forest. With all of us in there sharing and participating and connecting with one another, we are shifting the cultural consciousness away from isolation and apathy that have been plaguing us. We are infusing our voices, our stories, and our opinions. One of the things that you have to start with there is authenticity. Now, authenticity doesn't mean, airing all of your naughty bits online. Not that there's anything wrong with that. What it is, though, is you finding a comfortable space of what you decide that you want to share with other people. That mix can be different for different people, but authenticity is what begins to connect us to one another. You also need to find people who are not like you. This is key. Kermit knew that he was not the only person out there who wanted to go to Hollywood and make it big, but did you really think that he set out to find a bear and a pig and a dog and a gonzo and a chicken along the way? No, not so much. So his dream was made that much more rich because of the different people in his group. There wouldn't have been a very interesting show just about a bunch of banjo-playing frogs. Instead, he created this situation where no idea was too silly and no goal was too high. If you are interested in changing the world, you need to surround yourself with people who do not look like you and who are not always ideologically similar. Because birds of the feather do flock together. That's called homophily for you smarty pants in the room. But, yes. But this is kind of like DNA, where you have a bunch of same genes mixing around the gene pool. Eventually, the species mutates poorly and dies off. That's a bad thing. We need to interrupt this with very intentional cross-pollination of our ideas across multiple social barriers. This is up to you. Who are you connecting with? Who do you have relationships with? Next, you have to trust everyone. So on paper, it doesn't really look like a great idea to get into a Studebaker with a bear with a questionable stand-up routine. But Kermit knew to look past that, and he trusted Fozzie, and he continued to trust Fozzie, or to continue to trust people as he met them throughout his entire journey. Why? Because they were authentic with one another right from the start. Every time he met someone, they shared their stories with one another. You had Gonzo telling him that he wanted to go to Bombay to become a movie star. You had Piggy, who was well on her way to modeling and acting stardom. Then you had Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem. They were converting a church into an organic coffee house. That kind of sharing and storytelling builds trust. And and it's that kind of trust that makes people say, yes, me too. Kermit wasn't afraid that it sounded silly that he wanted to go to Hollywood to audition for Orson Welles. Having that kind of trust is fundamental to any kind of movement building. Next thing you need to do is embrace empathy. Note that I am not talking about sympathy here. Sympathy is when you feel bad that something bad has happened to someone. Empathy is where you are experiencing the emotions of the other people around you. Why is empathy important for social change? Without it, it's really hard to identify with other people and their experiences. People ultimately, they fear the other and they fear change. Empathy helps shift that fear away. Kermit had a tremendous amount of empathy, whether it was rescuing Fozzie off of the stage of a bad gig or commiserating with Ralph the dog. His relationships were built on trust, and empathy helped deepen those bonds. It helped move them away from isolation. So ultimately, at the end of the movie, when Kermit's out there in the ghost town and he's facing down Doc Hopper and this frog assassin, he's looking down the barrel of the gun, he turns around and he sees this whole group of people who he's made friends with, who said, "I'm not going to let you go down alone." They face down Doc Hopper. They stand ultimately for friendship, justice, and dreaming. And I think those are all values that we can all get behind. Thank you.